He didn't expect to find a soul that night, let alone one abandoned, beaten, and tied to a bus stop bench in the freezing dark. No collar, no chip, just ribs, scars, and a pair of eyes that refused to give up. Others had passed. Some had looked, but no one stopped. Until Officer Caleb Turner did, a young cop with his own wounds, now face to face with a different kind of war. What happened next will shake your heart, challenge your faith, and restore your belief that second chances aren't just for people, but for heroes with 4 legs. Before we begin, hit the like button, subscribe if you haven't already, and ring that notification bell so you never miss a story like this again. Oak Ridge, Tennessee, wore a veil of drizzle that evening, a cold, thin mist drifting beneath a sky the color of damp slate. The kind of night that kept people indoors, shutters drawn, and radios humming low in kitchens that smelled of soup. Outside, the street lamps flickered lazily, casting pale halos across empty sidewalks slick with rain. The wind carried the scent of wet asphalt and rust from old rail lines that cut through the southern edge of town. Officer Caleb Turner, 29, drove alone along Highway 62, his cruiser humming quietly beneath him. Tall and lean, with a squared jaw and an ever-present 5 o'clock shadow, Caleb looked every bit the part of the young cop. But there was something else behind his storm-gray eyes, something distant, pulled tight like a memory he hadn't spoken of in years. His dark brown hair, clipped short for regulation, was damp at the edges where sweat and rain met. He had transferred to Oak Ridge 6 months prior after a failed narcotics raid in Nashville left his partner dead and his sense of purpose broken in half. Tonight, his shift had ended late. He hadn't meant to take the long way home, but part of him liked the silence of roads less traveled. It gave him time to think, to not think. As the wipers smeared across the windshield, a faded sign for a bus rest stop flashed past in the corner of his vision, the kind of place that hadn't seen maintenance since the 1980s. A whim, or perhaps something deeper, urged him to slow down. He signaled, turned into the cracked lot, and parked beneath a trembling sodium light. The stop was almost ghostly in its abandonment. One plastic bench, yellowed and bolted to a concrete pad, a trash can overflowing with soggy flyers, and beside the bench, just beneath the weak overhang, something moved. Caleb squinted. At first, he thought it was a pile of discarded clothing, but then it shuddered. He stepped out, the cold biting through his jacket. His boots crunched on wet gravel as he approached, hand resting near his belt out of instinct. As he drew closer, his breath caught. Curled beneath the bench, wrapped in itself like a dying leaf, was a German shepherd. The dog was rail-thin, ribs pressing sharply against patchy matted fur that had once been black and rust but was now dulled to a sickly gray-brown. Dried blood clung around one ear. A wire, a piece of twisted steel, was looped cruelly around its neck and tethered to the bench's leg. The animal didn't snarl, didn't growl. It simply looked up. Its eyes were deep amber, dulled by exhaustion but still startlingly aware. There was no fear in them, only a kind of battered defiance, like a soldier too tired to salute, but not yet willing to lie down. Caleb crouched slowly, arms out. "Hey, buddy, I see you," he said softly. "You alone out here?" The dog didn't move, didn't even flinch, but his eyes followed Caleb's hands carefully. With practiced care, Caleb pulled out a folding blade and reached for the wire. The steel was old and bent, biting into the dog's flesh where it had tightened. He worked silently, lips pressed together until the wire snapped with a soft metallic twang. The dog gasped, a shallow, involuntary intake of air, as if not used to breathing freely. He shrugged off his duty jacket, wrapped it around the trembling creature, and gently lifted it into his arms. The weight surprised him. Despite its size, the dog felt hollow, more shadow than body, as if the soul had fled and only the shell remained. As Caleb turned to leave, something caught his eye on the bulletin board behind the bench, a scrap of weather-warped paper flapping in the wind. He approached, holding the dog tight against his chest. The flyer had been half torn, but the faded words were still legible. Lost K9. If found, call 702. The rest of the number was missing. He stared at it, heartbeat quickening. K9? Not a stray? He didn't know why, but a chill deeper than the cold ran through him. Back in the cruiser, he laid the dog gently across the back seat on a folded blanket he'd kept there since winter. The dog didn't resist. It simply closed its eyes, as if sleep was safer than trying to understand the moment. Caleb drove through the mist toward the Oak Ridge Veterinary Center, his mind turning over everything like puzzle pieces without corners. The bell above the glass door of Oak Ridge Veterinary Center let out a tired chime as Caleb Turner pushed it open, cradling the bundled weight of the injured German shepherd in his arms. The fluorescent lighting inside was harsh after the gloom outside, casting a sterile glow over the linoleum floors and faded green chairs lining the waiting room. It was past midnight, and the front desk was unmanned, until a voice called out from the hallway beyond. "Caleb?" came a low, slightly raspy voice. Dr. Grace Holloway stepped into the room, tying her salt gray hair into a messy knot behind her head. She was in her late 50s, tall, but beginning to stoop slightly from years of leaning over animals. Her features were sharp, high cheekbones, a thin mouth, eyes like granite, and she moved with the weary precision of someone who had seen too much cruelty in both animals and people. Grace had been Oak Ridge's only overnight emergency vet for over 2 decades, known for her blunt manner and her refusal to sugarcoat. She was the kind of woman who called death by its name and cried only when no one was watching. A divorce in her 30s and the loss of her first dog, Bella, to a hit-and-run had shaped her into a quiet force. Caleb nodded, voice tight. "Found him at a bus stop out near the county line. Wire around his neck. Looks bad." Grace's eyes narrowed, and she crossed the room in 3 strides. She took one look at the animal and her face changed, not softened exactly, but focused. She held out her arms wordlessly, and Caleb transferred the limp body into her care. "Exam room 2. Get the blanket off, but keep your jacket over his chest," she instructed, pushing through the swinging door. The room smelled of antiseptic and iodine, overlaid with the fainter, sadder scent of wet fur and old fear. Grace laid the dog on the steel table, flicked on the overhead lamp, and immediately began her examination. "He's dehydrated," she muttered, part to Caleb, part to herself. "Rib fractures, at least 2. Old bruising here, gash above the ear, probably from being struck. Paw pads torn up, been running too long on rough ground." Caleb stood to the side, silent but visibly tense. The dog, still wordless, watched everything with one open eye. The other was swollen shut. But that good eye, it was bright, tracking, waiting. "He hasn't made a sound," Caleb said. "Didn't growl, didn't whine." Grace paused, tilting the dog's rear leg gently. "That's not always a good sign. Shock sets in quiet." And then she saw it. "Hold the light here," she said, and Caleb stepped forward. Etched into the inner thigh, almost faded with time, was a faint string of numbers and letters. K92A8. "Huh," she said. "Military format. Maybe private sector. These markings are used when you don't want a chip to trace back." Caleb blinked. "You think he's from a K9 unit?" "I think someone didn't want him found again." They exchanged a look. Caleb felt something tighten in his chest, like a memory being slowly drawn to the surface but refusing to take full form. Grace reached for a scanner and hovered it over the dog's neck. No beep. "If there was a chip, it's been surgically removed. Poorly, too. There's scar tissue." The dog shifted suddenly. A low, almost inaudible exhale passed through his nose. His eye found Caleb's, not in fear, not in pain, but in recognition. That was when Caleb said it, barely above a whisper. "His name's Rex." Grace didn't question it. She merely nodded. "All right. Let's see what we can save of him." 2 hours later, Rex was bandaged, sedated, and resting in the recovery cage beneath a heating lamp. Grace sat at her cluttered desk, sipping coffee from a mug that said, "Vet life = fur plus sleep deprivation." Caleb was on the opposite side, arms crossed, jacket back on but still wet at the collar. "He's got fight in him," Grace said. "But it's like he's waiting for an order, like he doesn't know if he's safe yet." Caleb looked down at the floor. "Yeah," he said. "I know the feeling." When he finally stepped outside, the rain had stopped, leaving the streets glistening beneath the fading moon. He drove home in silence, one hand unconsciously tracing the wheel's stitching where the leather had begun to fray. At the modest bungalow he now called home, a two-bedroom at the end of a quiet cul-de-sac, his porch light flickered on with motion. As he parked, a small shape darted across his lawn and paused near the driveway. It was Liam, his neighbor's 11-year-old son. The boy was thin and pale, with unruly light brown hair and a face that seemed permanently cautious. He wore an oversized hoodie despite the wet warmth and had a comic book clutched in one hand. Liam rarely spoke, especially to adults. Caleb had learned through passive observation that the boy spent more time sketching in his notebook than speaking at school. Rumor had it he'd been pulled out of his last school for an incident. The other kids didn't go near him. That didn't bother Liam. He had no use for crowds. "You're back late," the boy said without preamble. Caleb nodded. "Had to help someone." Liam looked up, squinting. "Is it true what they said? That you used to work in Nashville? That something went wrong?" Caleb didn't answer directly. "Things always go wrong," he said. "It's what you do next that counts." The boy considered that. Then, "Was it a dog?" Caleb raised an eyebrow. "What makes you think that?" Liam pointed at the backseat window. "Blankets covered in fur, and you left your porch light on." Smart kid. Caleb smiled faintly. "Yeah. His name's Rex." Liam didn't ask to see him. He didn't say much else, just muttered, "Hope he makes it," and turned back into the shadows of his yard, comic book clutched tight. Caleb stood there a moment longer before going inside, locking the door behind him and letting the silence settle. The quiet of Oak Ridge came wrapped in cotton after midnight, soft winds rustling through bare tree branches, distant dogs barking once and falling silent, and street lamps humming like tired sentries. Caleb Turner's house sat at the edge of a cul-de-sac flanked by chain-link fences and porch swings that creaked in the wind. A single porch light illuminated his weathered front door and the faded steps leading up to it. He hadn't meant to fall asleep on the couch, but the day had worn him down to bone. Rex lay curled nearby on an old quilt, his ribs still showing, though his breathing was calmer now. Caleb had carried the dog inside earlier that evening, gingerly settling him where he could be close. The TV played some old detective rerun in the background, forgotten and muted. At exactly 3:07 a.m., Rex stirred. It started with a twitch of his ears, followed by the low rumble of a growl swelling in his throat. He stood, limping slightly, and padded to the window. His head tilted, eyes locked on something outside. Then, sharp and sudden, he barked. Caleb sat up, instantly alert. "Rex?" Another bark, louder this time. The kind meant not to scare but to warn. Caleb moved to the window and peered through the blinds. Nothing. Just wet grass, a pale moon above the pine trees, and the same stillness as before. He reached for the flashlight in the drawer, flicked it on, and stepped onto the porch in bare feet. That's when he saw it, wedged into the center of his front door, a black-handled combat knife. The blade was stabbed deep into the wood, and impaled against it was a piece of torn, yellowed paper. The writing was crude, scrawled in thick red marker. "Return what's ours." His stomach dropped. The words were sloppy but intentional. This wasn't a random act of vandalism. Someone had been here. Someone had stood on these same steps, knife in hand, and watched the house long enough to leave this behind. He scanned the yard. Nothing moved. No tire marks, no footprints, just the gentle sway of tree branches and the chill crawling up his spine. Inside, Rex was still at the window, tail stiff, body on edge. Caleb shut the door, locked both bolts, and pulled the blinds. His heartbeat drummed like a fist against his ribs. He took the note down, laid it on the kitchen table, and stared at it like it might give up answers if he looked long enough. The handwriting, the message. It wasn't just a threat. It was a claim. He stayed awake the rest of the night, sipping black coffee from a chipped mug. Rex now settled beside his feet, but glancing at the window every few minutes like he didn't trust the dark anymore. By morning, the weight in Caleb's chest had hardened into something else: resolve. He drove to the vet clinic as the sun broke through the clouds, washing the town in a dull, golden light. The parking lot was still empty when he pulled in. He waited until 7 o'clock a.m. before the side door opened and Grace Holloway stepped out, her coat draped over one arm, hair tied in a loose braid. "Morning," she muttered, surprised to see him. "Need to talk," Caleb said. Inside her office, which smelled like antiseptic and chamomile tea, Caleb placed the knife and the note on her desk. Grace didn't flinch. She studied them for several long seconds, then slowly sat down. "I've seen that kind of thing before," she said. Caleb raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean?" Grace exhaled. 3 years ago, someone left a dead cat on my porch, neatly placed. Eyes open, no blood, just waiting. She leaned back, jaw tightening. It happened after I took in a dog that had wandered onto the freeway, a little brindle mutt, maybe 6 months old. She had a weird burn mark on her side and didn't act like a stray. Always waited for orders. I checked her for a chip, didn't find one, but she had a tattoo. Just like Rex. The day after I posted a photo online trying to find her owner, that cat showed up. Then someone spray-painted my back wall, said I was interfering. Caleb narrowed his eyes. "And?" "I moved the dog to a rescue center in Knoxville. A week later, someone broke my clinic window. Nothing stolen. Just a message, a reminder. Did you report it?" "Of course, but they had no leads, no prints, nothing solid." Caleb leaned forward, voice low. "What happened to the dog?" Grace looked down. "She disappeared, vanished the night before she was set to be transferred again. We think someone came for her." Silence settled thick between them. "I think we've stirred the same hornet's nest," Grace said, "and this time they're not just warning." Caleb sat back in the wooden chair, the vinyl cushion creaking beneath him. His mind whirred, images forming, aligning. Someone had trained Rex, someone had kept records hidden, and someone now wanted him back or gone. "They called him ours," Caleb said. "Not your dog, not the dog, ours." Grace nodded. "That means he was part of something. Maybe still is." She opened a drawer and pulled out a manila folder, sliding it across the desk. "I kept this, just in case. Photos, notes, the tag the brindle pup had before it vanished." Caleb flipped through them. One photo showed a faded steel cage with numbers etched onto the top bar. Another showed a dog harness with burn marks near the buckles. And there, taped to the last page, was a printed map with a red circle around a wooded area outside town. "What's this?" "A place the dog kept pulling toward during walks. I thought it was a coincidence, but now—" Caleb folded the map, pocketed it. He stood. "Thanks, Grace. I'll be careful." "Be smarter than careful," she said. "Careful doesn't stop people like this." The road to Blue Mountain was one of those forgotten back roads that barely clung to the map. A winding stretch of cracked asphalt that bled into gravel, then into dirt. Tall pines pressed in on either side like old soldiers, their trunks blackened with age, their needles thick with the scent of sap and smoke. Caleb Turner sat behind the wheel of his cruiser, Rex riding silently in the back seat. The dog was healing, slowly. The gash above his ear had scabbed and the bruising along his ribs was less pronounced. But he still limped slightly, and his right eye remained warily half-lidded when strangers came near. It had been 2 days since the knife was found on Caleb's door. Since then, the name Blue Mountain had circled his thoughts like a buzzard. The map Grace had given him marked the facility's rough location, tucked into the foothills of the mountain range, away from town, accessible only by a single road and a locked gate. Online, the place advertised itself as Blue Mountain Elite Dogs, a high-end training center for executive protection animals. Their website showed clean kennels, muscular Belgian Malinois posed beside black-suited handlers, and bold text boasting phrases like discipline, strength, trust. But what caught Caleb's eye was the fine print. Private demonstrations by appointment only, no walk-ins. Rex shifted in the back, ears perking as the road narrowed further. "Yeah, I don't like it either," Caleb muttered. At the edge of a rusted cattle gate, a sign in bold red lettering warned, "Private property. Trespassers will be prosecuted." Caleb parked beneath a canopy of trees far enough back not to be seen and stepped out into the thick silence. The air smelled of pine needles and something else, bleach maybe. Beneath the scent of trees was the unmistakable tang of disinfectant, a cleanliness too unnatural for woods. He didn't bring Rex out, not yet. Instead, he walked the edge of the tree line, boots quiet on the mossy ground. The facility was surrounded by fencing, topped with barbed wire. Cameras on rust-proof poles swept the perimeter with automated precision. Beyond that, he saw rows of kennels, long, low buildings painted forest green to blend in with the surroundings. Men in dark uniforms moved between the structures. Most were lean and angular, their movements efficient. Caleb recognized the posture. Military or ex-military. Trained to obey, not to ask. Then he saw him, Bo Radcliffe. Even from a distance, he was unmistakable. Tall, broad-shouldered, maybe in his mid-50s. His silver blonde hair was buzzed close on the sides but swept neatly back on top. He wore a dark green polo tucked into tactical pants and aviator sunglasses that reflected the clouds. His arms were muscular, but age had stiffened his gait. The kind of man who used to run 10 miles every morning but now paid others to do it for him. His name had come up once in Caleb's past life, a brief mention in a narcotics file. Former Army Ranger, dishonorably discharged for unauthorized activity in Colombia. No conviction, no follow-up. Bo was walking a younger man through the facility, pointing at different kennels. From the body language, Caleb guessed the other man was a client. The younger guy wore a slim gray suit and expensive shoes caked with mountain dust. Bo gestured toward one of the runs and a dog barked. Sharp, aggressive, not playful. Caleb couldn't see the animal clearly, but it sounded agitated. He pulled back before either of the men looked up. He took a few pictures on his phone, then slipped silently back to his car. As he drove away, his mind spun with half-formed connections. Military tattoos, surgically removed chips, dogs trained for purposes they never consented to. The map Grace had given him hadn't just marked a location. It had opened a door. Later that night, back at home, Caleb sat at the kitchen table flipping through one of his old case files. The one that had never let him go. The Nashville Raid. It had been a bust, literally. The house was rigged with explosives, and what little evidence survived had been a bloodied photograph found beneath a loose floorboard. The photo showed a shipping container with several dogs chained inside. On the leg of one German Shepherd was a faint tattoo, K92A7. Rex's was K92A8. "Same batch," Caleb whispered. His phone buzzed, a message from Liam. "Can I show you something?" Caleb frowned, then walked next door. The boy met him at the porch, notebook in hand, face half hidden beneath his hoodie. "I drew Rex," Liam said. He opened the sketchbook, revealing a charcoal sketch of Rex curled in sleep, one paw folded under his chin, the other scarred. The drawing was detailed, not just in anatomy, but in emotion. Rex didn't look peaceful. He looked watchful, as if even in dreams, he didn't trust the dark. But Caleb's breath caught on something else. In the corner of the sketch, Liam had drawn Rex's back leg, and on it, he'd sketched the tattoo. "How'd you see this?" Caleb asked. Liam shrugged. "I saw it when you carried him in the other night. Didn't know it meant anything. I just liked the way it looked." Caleb stared at the mark, then at Liam. In the boy's sketch, the numbers were clear. K92A8, nearly identical to the tattoo from the drug raid photo. "Liam, this isn't just a drawing, it's evidence." Liam blinked. "Of what?" "Of something bad. Something organized." Liam stepped back slightly, unsure. "Is Rex in danger?" Caleb looked him in the eyes. "He was, but not anymore. Not while he's here." The boy nodded slowly and returned to his porch. Caleb stood in the yard long after, watching the streetlights flicker and fade, the cold biting at his skin, his mind burning with connections. Somewhere between a raid gone wrong, a dog who wouldn't bark, and a sketch drawn by a lonely boy, the truth was beginning to take shape. And Caleb wasn't going to let it disappear again. The late afternoon sun dipped beneath the rolling hills of Oak Ridge, bleeding warm gold across the rooftops before being swallowed by the cool breath of Tennessee twilight. Officer Caleb Turner sat alone in his kitchen, elbows resting on the wooden table scarred from years of use, the only sound in the room the low hum of the fridge and the steady inhale of Rex lying at his feet. The German shepherd was sleeping, or at least pretending to. His ears still flinched with each creak of the floorboards and his tail twitched in his dreams. Though his coat had regained some shine from Grace's care, his frame was still too thin, too weathered for his age. There was something ancient in Rex's eyes now, as if he had carried more than pain in those bones, memories too dark for words. Caleb's phone buzzed on the table. No caller ID. He let it ring once, twice. On the third time, he pressed record on his audio app and answered. "This is Officer Turner." There was a pause. Then a voice came through, smooth, official-sounding, masculine. "Officer Turner, this is Agent Henry Cole with the Federal Canine Retrieval Division. We've been tracking an unauthorized K-9 unit, code K92A8. We believe it's in your possession." Caleb sat straighter. "And how did you find me?" "We've been monitoring online vet records and civilian reports. Your recent visit to Grace Holloway's clinic flagged our database." "That's an odd protocol. Doesn't sound like standard procedure." "It's all classified," the man said smoothly. "What matters is that dog is government property, decommissioned and listed as dangerous after its last assignment. You're not cleared to house it. And what do you want me to do?" "There's a storage facility off Riverfront Drive, Lot 41. Old freight terminal. Bring the dog there, alone. We'll take it from there. No documents, no badge number, no official request through the station." Everything about the call reeked of a setup. Caleb let the silence hang. "I'll think about it," he said, and hung up. Rex had lifted his head, ears tilted. Caleb met the dog's eyes, calm, intelligent, but not without worry. He replayed the voicemail twice more. Every word sounded practiced, polished, too clean. He grabbed his laptop and began checking databases. There was no Federal Canine Retrieval Division, no Agent Henry Cole in any law enforcement registry. Whatever this was, it wasn't official, but it was something. He grabbed his service weapon, checked the chamber, holstered it under his jacket. Then he reached for a black nylon belt from his drawer and clipped a slim GPS tracker, one issued during a trafficking case he'd worked the year before, into its underside. It was small, easy to miss, and would ping every 3 minutes to an encrypted server he controlled. He looked at Rex again. The dog was sitting now, back straight, like he knew Caleb was preparing for something. "Guess you're still a working dog after all," Caleb murmured. From the shelf by the window he retrieved his phone and opened the camera. He hesitated. Then he hit record. "Mom," he began, quietly, trying to steady his voice, "if you're watching this, something's gone wrong. I got a call asking me to turn over Rex, but I think it's a trap." He paused and turned the phone slightly, capturing Rex in frame, now sitting with his head slightly tilted as if he understood the moment. "This dog, he's not just some discarded asset. He's been through something. He's survived something. I don't know what yet, but I think people are willing to kill for it, or kill to cover it up." He swallowed, voice cracking just slightly. "If I don't make it back, Grace Holloway knows what's going on. She'll explain. And Rex, he belongs with Liam. I've seen the way they look at each other. Like two survivors in the same storm. Please make sure they stay together, because I think they both need someone who won't give up on them." He ended the recording, encrypted it, and sent it to a private folder. Then he stood, patted Rex once on the side, and walked to the door. Outside, the wind had turned sharp, pulling through the trees with a dry hiss. Street lamps flickered to life as he stepped down the porch and toward his parked cruiser. Rex followed, hesitant, his gait still uneven but strong. "I need you to stay here, bud," Caleb said gently, crouching to meet his eyes. I'll be back soon." Rex gave a low whine, leaning into his chest. Caleb hugged the dog hard, for a second longer than he meant to, then stepped away. He opened the car door, paused, and then he reached down and opened the passenger seat door too. "All right," he muttered, almost to himself, "but only because I know you'd break out anyway." Rex hopped in, settling with practiced efficiency into the seat. The cruiser pulled away from the curb and disappeared into the fog curling up from the Tennessee River. The night was thick with fog and the bitter breath of winter. Along the banks of the Tennessee River, the abandoned freight warehouse loomed like a dead giant. Skeletal, rusted, forgotten by time. Its corrugated metal siding flapped in the wind like torn sails, and every creak of its broken frame sounded like something alive breathing too close. Caleb killed the headlights of his cruiser a block away and coasted in under cover of darkness. Beside him, Rex sat upright in the passenger seat, ears twitching, body coiled like a loaded spring. His wounds had barely closed from the week before, but the fire in his gaze hadn't dulled. If anything, it had deepened. He was alert, tense, not afraid, but watchful. "Stay close," Caleb whispered as he stepped out of the car, his boots crunching softly on gravel. He tapped the device on his belt, ensuring the GPS beacon still blinked its red pulse. If anything happened, Grace would know where he was. That much gave him a thread of comfort. The warehouse doors were slightly ajar, a single bare bulb above them swinging from its frayed wire. The call had said 9 p.m. It was 9:07. No sign of anyone. Too quiet. He moved inside, flashlight off, relying on his memory of the layout he had studied online. The main floor stretched wide, littered with empty pallets, broken shelving, and long-forgotten crates. Dust floated like ghosts in the dim moonlight filtering through broken windows. Then, a sound. A footstep. Soft, deliberate. Caleb turned, but too late. The first blow landed hard, a blunt force to the back of his shoulder, knocking him to the ground. The flashlight rolled out of his grip. He scrambled, disoriented. A shadow loomed above him, raising what looked like a lead pipe. Caleb rolled just in time, the pipe clanging beside his head. "Where's the dog?" a voice barked. Before Caleb could respond, Rex growled, a deep, guttural snarl that vibrated through the floorboards. From the dark, he launched forward, tackling the man off Caleb with a snarl and a blur of muscle. But there were more. Another attacker, lean, mid-30s, scruffy beard, eyes wired with adrenaline, appeared from behind a stack of crates and hurled a net toward Rex. The mesh tangled around the dog mid-air, bringing him down with a thud. Rex writhed, biting at the netting as the man moved in with a tranquilizer dart. "No!" Caleb shouted. He lunged, grabbing the man's wrist and slamming it into the floor. The dart clattered away. But the third man, tall, shaven head, thick arms, tattooed forearms, slammed Caleb into a beam and pinned him there. His breath reeked of chewing tobacco. "You should have just handed him over," he hissed. Through the haze of pain, Caleb reached for the whistle strung under his collar, a small metal tube designed for canine handlers. He blew, sharp and hard. It was silent to human ears, but Rex heard. From within the net, something snapped. The German shepherd, though wounded and restrained, let out a roar and tore through the mesh with a surge of desperate force. He lunged, sinking his teeth into the shaven-headed man's arm, dragging him down with terrifying precision. The warehouse filled with chaos. In the chaos, the far doors burst open. Red and blue strobes split the shadows. "Police! Drop your weapons!" Leading the charge was Dr. Grace Holloway, her brown braid damp from sweat and fog, still wearing her navy winter coat over hospital scrubs. She was flanked by Detective Amy Nilsson, a tall, composed woman in her late 30s with a sharp jawline and steady hands gripping her sidearm. Grace had followed Caleb's GPS signal and brought backup. Amy didn't hesitate. She ordered her team forward. Within seconds, 2 of the assailants were disarmed and on the ground, groaning. The third tried to flee but ran straight into a waiting officer's baton. From behind a rusted crate, a 4th figure emerged. Bo Radcliffe. The man was in his early 50s, tall, with silvering blonde hair combed neatly back, wearing a camel trench coat and black gloves. His calm demeanor stood in chilling contrast to the violence around him. His eyes, cold and calculating, landed on Caleb and then on Rex. "I see you've brought company," Bo said softly. "You're under arrest," Amy snapped. "For what?" Bo raised his hands with mock civility. "Helping retrieve a stolen federal dog?" Grace stepped forward. "That dog isn't stolen. He's abused, tortured, and you're done hiding behind false divisions and shell companies." Bo's eyes narrowed. "You think arresting me stops this?" "No," Caleb said, stepping beside Rex, "but it stops you." Officers moved in and cuffed Bo, reading him his rights. The smirk on his face never faltered. Meanwhile, Rex limped back to Caleb's side, bloody but standing. One of the officers, a young black woman named Officer Dana Fielding, with tight curls and a steady hand, knelt beside him. "He okay?" "He saved my life," Caleb replied. Dana reached for her body cam, replaying the footage. The image showed Rex breaking free of the net, hurling himself between Caleb and the attacker. He didn't hesitate, didn't flinch, just acted. That moment, a wounded dog, fierce with purpose, standing over his partner, would soon be picked up by local news. The freeze frame of that image would be plastered across headlines with one phrase: "Loyalty lives." But in that warehouse, with the danger subdued, there were no reporters, no applause, only the sound of rain starting to fall again, tapping gently on the tin roof, and the quiet hum of relief settling in their chests. The next morning dawned gray and wet, the rain persistent, as if the skies themselves mourned what had been uncovered. Inside the Oak Ridge Police Department, a wave of silence had settled over the main floor. Caleb Turner stood at the head of the small conference room, arms crossed, watching as digital photographs flickered across the projection screen. The images were grim: dogs in cages, stacks of forged registration documents, heat maps showing illegal transfers across state lines. Bo Radcliffe's arrest the night before had opened a door none of them were ready for. What had begun as a suspicious call about a lone dog had unraveled into a nationwide ring. Detective Amy Nilsson, sharp-eyed and always composed, stood beside him. "We found over 70 dogs registered under shell training programs connected to Radcliffe's businesses," she said. "And that's just in the last fiscal year." She clicked to another slide. This one showed GPS-tagged records of animals moved through Blackstone County, then across state lines to Nevada, Texas, and even Mexico. Caleb shook his head slowly. "And no one flagged it?" Amy sighed. The paperwork was buried under layers of legal front companies, legit-sounding names like Elite Companion Dogs LLC and Blue Ridge Tactical Training. They even filed taxes like real businesses. At the back of the room stood a new face, Agent Dale McCreary, early 40s, with pale blue eyes and a military posture that hadn't softened with time. He wore a battered leather holster and a crisp brown tie over his field shirt. He represented the Department of Animal Crimes and Trafficking, a lesser-known federal task force with jurisdiction in cross-state violations. Quiet, skeptical, and direct. "Rex," he said flatly, nodding toward the dog lying near Caleb's feet, "was listed KIA. El Paso, 18 months ago, part of a narcotics takedown operation that went sideways. They claimed he died in an explosion." Caleb looked down at Rex, whose scarred chest rose and fell slowly, his body still bruised from the fight 2 nights before. The dog's ears flicked at his name, but his eyes remained steady. "He didn't die," Caleb said softly. "He survived, and someone saw value in keeping him hidden." Dale nodded. "More than value. A dog like him, trained, battle-tested, trauma-hardened, fetches 10 to 20 grand on the black market. That's why Radcliffe had him tagged as dead. No red flags, just a ghost-turned-weapon." "Not anymore," Caleb muttered. Amy turned to the group. "We'll open the files to the press after the forensic teams finish processing the storage facility. Until then, Every name, every dog, every last one of those monsters stays locked in evidence. The meeting ended in a cold hush. Outside the station, the rain had turned to drizzle. The sidewalks glistened silver, and the town itself seemed to hold its breath. That afternoon, in a much quieter part of Oak Ridge, Liam Nolan sat cross-legged on his bedroom carpet, chewing on the cap of a blue pen. His room was small, papered with sketches, some of superheroes, some of animals, most of them slightly crooked, as if the hands that drew them still trembled sometimes. Liam was 11, with wiry limbs, unruly brown curls, and a permanent bruise on his elbow from a recent fall. His mother, a night nurse at Oak Ridge General, worked double shifts, so Liam spent most afternoons alone, except now, when Rex came by, resting near the window like a silent sentinel. The assignment had been simple: write about someone you trust. But trust wasn't simple for Liam. He remembered the way Rex had looked at him that first day. Wary, tired, but not judgmental. The dog didn't care that Liam stuttered when he got nervous or that he flinched when voices got too loud. Rex didn't laugh when Liam couldn't throw a ball in a straight line. And so, slowly, the boy wrote, "His name is Rex. He doesn't speak, but he listens better than anyone I know. When I'm with him, I don't feel weird or wrong. I just feel like me. That's why I trust him, because he's never once asked me to be anyone else." He didn't show his mom the essay, but Mrs. Karpinski, his teacher, did. She was a plump, kind-faced woman with stiff knees and a passion for poetry. She read Liam's work out loud the next morning, eyes misting halfway through. The classroom fell silent. One student clapped, then another. By lunch, the principal had posted it on the school's website. By dinner, a local reporter had picked it up. Oak Ridge Boy writes moving tribute to rescued canine hero. The article spread. By morning, it had reached the town paper. By evening, it was in 3 counties. And somewhere in the chaos of headlines and investigations, an image of Rex, sitting beside Liam on the porch, both looking out into the fog, became something more than just a story. It became a symbol, not of victory, but of healing. The sun broke gently over the hills of eastern Tennessee, casting soft golden rays across the fresh paint and warm cedar siding of a brand-new facility nestled just outside Oak Ridge. The sign above the entrance read simply, "Rex's Refuge." Bold letters carved into reclaimed barnwood, and beside it, etched in iron, stood the silhouette of a German shepherd mid-guard, tail raised, eyes forward. It wasn't just a tribute. It was a promise. A year had passed since the arrests, the trials, the newspaper storm. What had begun with a single battered dog found at a bus stop had become something far greater. Caleb Turner, now 27, stood just inside the main entrance wearing a black Henley under a forest green utility jacket. His shoulders were broader, but not from weightlifting, from purpose. His brown hair was shorter now, and his jawline traced with a day's worth of scruff. The lingering bruises had long since healed, but the weight in his eyes had settled into something steady, something rooted. He looked around the lobby of Rex's Refuge where staff and guests were mingling. Some were old veterans, some were city officers from nearby counties. Others were simply locals, curious, hopeful, or wounded in their own quiet ways. To the left of the lobby, glass windows opened into the rehab wing, where padded indoor tracks and training stations awaited their first group of rescues. To the right, the veterinary care room, already warm with soft lighting and calm voices. A little farther out back was the dog yard, fenced, grassy, shaded with trees, and beyond that, rows of custom-built kennels, each painted with a name in chalk. A home, not a cage. At the heart of it all, pacing gently along the outer fence, was Rex. He was no longer the skeletal, haunted creature Caleb had once lifted from under a bench. His black and rust coat had filled out, sleek and gleaming in the morning light. The scars were still there, mostly along his hindquarters, but they no longer looked like wounds. They looked like stories. His gait had a slight limp, but he moved with purpose. Head high, eyes aware. A leader among dogs. Today was not just the opening. It was the naming ceremony. The moment Rex would be introduced officially as the sanctuary's first mentor canine. A gentle term for a fierce role, showing abused dogs that trust could be rebuilt, that humans weren't all monsters. Out in the field, near the main platform, rows of folding chairs were filling fast. At the center stage stood a short podium with 2 microphones. One was set low, because the second speaker wasn't tall. Liam Nolan, now 12, wore a crisp white shirt tucked into navy slacks, his once messy hair combed awkwardly to the side. A red clip-on tie was fastened a little crooked at the collar. His palms were sweating, but his eyes searched the crowd bravely. He'd grown. Still small for his age, still shy in crowds, but there was something new in him. When he had heard Caleb was founding a sanctuary for dogs like Rex, he hadn't hesitated. Every Saturday, Liam had shown up in rubber boots and a backpack full of biscuits and sketch pads. He'd learned how to walk the dogs, how to brush them, how to calm them during thunderstorms. Rex was his constant companion, his shadow and shield. "Ready?" Caleb asked from beside him now. Liam nodded. Caleb squeezed his shoulder and then stepped back, giving him the stage. The crowd hushed. Liam cleared his throat, stepped up, and began reading from the note card he'd folded and unfolded at least 30 times that morning. "My name is Liam," he said, his voice cracking slightly, but holding. "And I want to tell you about my friend." He looked down at Rex sitting at the foot of the stage like a statue carved from stone. Liam continued. "Last year, I didn't think people could change, or dogs. I thought broken things stayed broken, but Rex showed me that's not true. He taught me how to walk without being afraid. He taught me how to listen without needing words, and most of all, he taught me that we all need someone who doesn't give up on us." There was a pause. The wind shifted. "And that's what this place is for all the dogs, and maybe even some of the people, who just need a second chance." He looked down, swallowed. Then, like it was planned, Rex stood, walked up to Liam, and placed his front paw gently on the boy's shoulder. The crowd broke. Applause thundered. Someone wept quietly in the third row. Flashbulbs popped from local news crews. But Liam didn't flinch. He smiled. Rex stayed there, solid, unshaken. Standing behind the crowd, Grace Holloway, now acting as the refuge's chief medical advisor, watched the scene with pride and misty eyes. Her lab coat flapped lightly in the breeze, stethoscope looped around her neck. Next to her was Mayor Sheila Watkins, a tall, elegant woman in her 50s with a silver bob and a presence like iron in silk. Sheila had lost her own rescue Labrador to cancer that year. When Caleb pitched the sanctuary idea, she not only approved the funding, she'd insisted the city donate the land. Caleb stepped up as the applause settled. "This place is about healing," he said into the mic. "Not just for animals, but for all of us who've been through something we weren't sure we'd survive." He gestured behind him. Rex's story didn't end when he got rescued. That's when it started. So today, we honor him not just as a survivor, but as a leader for those still learning how to trust again. Another round of applause. And then, music. Soft acoustic guitar hummed from a nearby speaker as the ribbon was cut. Guests toured the facility. Dogs barked softly behind fences, but not with fear, with curiosity. And in the midst of it all, Rex and Liam moved from kennel to kennel like a pair of sentries. That afternoon, a girl named Ava, age 9, came with her foster parents to meet a dog named Clover, an anxious mutt with one ear bent permanently sideways. The girl was hesitant, near tears. Then Rex approached, sat down beside her, and looked up at her with those amber eyes. Ava reached out, and Clover came closer. Sometimes God's greatest miracles don't come from the sky. They come in fur-covered bodies with wounded hearts, walking quietly into our lives to remind us what it means to love, to protect, and to heal. Rex wasn't just a dog. He was proof that even those who've been hurt the most can become a light for others. He taught us that loyalty doesn't fade with pain, that courage doesn't disappear with scars, and that second chances are real, for animals, for people, for all of us. In a world that often rushes past the hurting, this story reminds us to stop, to see, to care. Because sometimes the one you save ends up saving you. So if this story moved your heart, please share it with someone who needs hope today. Leave a comment below and tell us the name of the animal that changed your life. And if you believe that love, loyalty, and second chances are miracles from God, type Amen in the comments. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more true stories that will restore your faith in the goodness of this world. May God bless you and every soul you've ever loved, whether they walk on 2 legs or 4.